Hey, how's it going? It's Ollie here. Time for scale tip number 3. Now, quick warning in advance, this scale tip is not going to massage your ego. And although it might not feel great in the beginning, you'll thank me for it in the long run. This is the tip. Don't get ahead of yourself, right? So if you've got a 6-figure business right now, then first of all, pat yourself on the back because you are one of the very small percentage of entrepreneurs who make it that far. Right? Not everyone gets to have a 6-figure business. But here's what I wanted to share today. Really, you're just getting started on your journey. Right? You're just getting started when you're at 6 figures. Now you've proven that you have a business model that's viable. You've proven that there's a demand for the thing you're selling. And you've proven that you're willing to do the work to actually make it happen. And a lot of people just can't figure out those things for whatever reason. I know this because I've worked with so many, like thousands of newbies, and a lot of them just for whatever reason try these things for 10, 15, 20 years and it never happens. So pat yourself on the back, you've done well. But this is just the start. Right? So what I wanted to share with you today is one of the most important things you will ever hear if you're interested in really growing your business and taking it to the next level, and it's this. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't get ahead of yourself. Right? One of the big traps that a lot of entrepreneurs get sucked into, especially with the culture of like Instagram and YouTube and being flashy, is increasing the amount you spend on your lifestyle to try and keep up with the Joneses. So this manifests itself in many ways. For most people, it's like, you know, as soon as you start earning 10k per month, you know, it's time to buy a ridiculously expensive car, right? Instantly, because now you've made it, and to align yourself with the identity of someone who's made it, you think that you need a really flashy car. It could be other things too. It could be a really ridiculously expensive house. Maybe you get a house with a mortgage which is just really inflated and way higher than your income, right? Maybe you stop taking public transport and you know, hire a driver or something, or you know, all these things. And the reason why you're doing it is because, well, number one, you want to keep up with all the other people on Instagram and kind of show off and all that stuff. And number two, you feel like you should because you are now successful. Well, I want to urge you to reconsider this stuff. And it's hard to say these things because, you know, I've done a lot of them. So it's funny, if I was watching this video when I first hit 6 figures, I probably wouldn't have listened to a word. Right? But if I can get through to just 1 or 2 people who are there, and I can help them, you know, avoid some of the stress that happens when you make this mistake, then this video will be worth it. If that's one thing I can do today, then this video will be worth it. The truth of the matter is, I felt the most free in business when I was bringing in 6 figures with my business, and my first business, and I had no expenses. Right? I built my first business when I was still living at my parents' house. Right? You imagine that? So think about it for a second. How many expenses did I have? Right? I had none. Right? I didn't even have to pay rent. I didn't even have to buy that much food. And so every penny that I had, which was a very small amount in the beginning, I could reinvest, and that my business could snowball because I had very little expenses. That level of freedom enables you to be so incredibly creative. Right? I could try things, I could try new stuff, and if it failed and we had a slow month, it didn't matter, right? Because I had no financial obligation to do really, really well. So all of the creativity going into my business was dependent on what I wanted to try, what I wanted to play with, what I wanted to experiment with, and it wasn't determined by having to make these payments on different elements of my lifestyle, right? So that was incredible, and that was one of the reasons why my business grew so quickly, and that's why it snowballed, right? And one of the most important things to have as an entrepreneur is a feeling of being able to play, right? Being able to be playful with your business, right? I can't remember if it was Carl Jung who describes the different identities you have, the different personalities you have. Like, everyone has several. One of them is the magician, right? So the ability to be playful and experiment with things and try things, see if it works, tweak things, and have that openness to experiment. When you have real financial strain because you've got this supercar and you've got this house and you've got all these bills and you've got all this lifestyle stuff to keep up with, all of a sudden that kills the magician inside you. You can't be playful anymore because you're constantly stressed. And then what happens? You end up going into a downward spiral because you've got all of this stuff happening, right? You've got all this financial obligation. You don't feel creative and you can't test things and try things, and you're in the state where, this has to work this week to pay the bills. And because you can't try things, which you have to do in business, your income will start to go down. And then what will happen is you won't be able to pay your bills. And that will feel horrible, and then you won't even be creative, like, even more. And things will just dive bomb. And I was in this situation. In fact, at one point I was spending a hell of a lot on lifestyle. This was a couple of years ago, and because of that I went into a bit of a downward spiral. Now thankfully I had this realization very quickly, and I didn't make any long-term commitments. I didn't buy any supercars and choose to pay over 5 years or whatever, what people do. I didn't do any of that stuff, right? Because to be honest, cars just aren't really my thing. I don't really care. I mean, maybe I'll get one day, but I'm not that bothered. So luckily I didn't do that. Luckily I didn't get a really expensive mortgage or anything. So what I did at that point is I realised I want to have the creativity. I don't want to have the flashy lifestyle because it doesn't really make you that happy. That's something you realise, it doesn't really affect your happiness that much. If anything, it makes you more miserable because you have all the stuff and it's not really doing what you thought it would, right? It's just like a sugar rush. So I went through the process of cutting out all of these expenses. Just anything that was costing me a lot with my lifestyle, I reduced it to get as close as I possibly could back to when I was living with my parents running a business. Obviously couldn't get quite as close because I was living in an apartment in another country, etc., etc. But once that happened, and once my expenses were very low and I could play again and I felt more free, that's when the business took off. That's when I scaled and then started to do 6-figure months, because I had that element of creativity. So please, if you're at 6 figures, listen to this message. Pass this message to someone who you think might be going down that path, who's got a good business, but they're just getting a little bit ahead of themselves. There's nothing wrong with buying things that are nice and having a bit of a lifestyle, but just don't get ahead of yourself, right? You shouldn't be acting like a billionaire when you're making 100k. It will hold you back and it will slow you down, and that's a really important lesson that I've learned along the way. Alright, hope this was helpful. Hope you can pass this to someone if you know someone who's in this situation, and I really can't wait to help you. By the way, if you want to get my book on the 2 ancient marketing strategies that all 7-figure coaches and 7-figure entrepreneurs use, and you want to get it for free, type scale in the comments and I'll send it to you. I usually charge for it, but you can have it for free because you're cool and you're here and you're watching my series, and this is a new series I want to promote. I want it to get bigger, so you can have it for free. So just type scale in the chat below and it will give you everything you need to take your business to the next level. Okay, it's a relatively short read, but it will help you restructure your business so you can scale in a huge way. Alright, now each day I'm testing like a different kind of lead magnet type thing to go along with these videos, so I don't know which one's going to be better. Today it's this one. While it's available, type in the comments and I'll give it to you. Alright, thanks a lot for watching the video. Share it if you know anyone who might benefit from it, and I'll see you tomorrow.